Hello, and welcome back to our online conference series, Reimagining Education, Inspiring Educators of Today and Tomorrow. Thank you for joining us for today's session, which will be the Leadership Matters debate. In this session, our panel will be sharing strategies for addressing key issues, such as staff retention and fostering a positive school culture. All of the themes discussed today are central for those in leadership roles and those also aspiring to lead. So we are delighted to welcome our three speakers. We have Andre Kofferman, who is a senior academic at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences, where he specialises in teacher development, school innovation, and teacher leadership. He's also course leader in the Educational Leadership Programme at the University of Amsterdam. We have Lucy Lakin, who is the principal at Carr Manor Community School. She is an expert in relational and restorative practice and passionate about collaboration and effective partnerships. Lucy has supported and mentored, trained other school leaders in how to develop inclusive school cultures. And we have Steve Barnes, who has been in school leadership for 18 years. He is currently the head teacher of the Pilgrim School. He has a master's in educational leadership as well as an NPQEL. His areas of interest include hope and positive psychology in leadership and education, which he plans to research at doctoral level in September. So a huge thank you to our speakers for joining us today. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box as we go through the debate. I'll now hand over to Philip Young, Head of Online Learning at BGU, who will be facilitating today's debate. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jess. Warm welcome to everybody who's joined the debate. And again, warm welcome to our speakers or debaters as well. And so we've been really looking forward to having this conversation because we've got some key challenges that we're going to be looking at this afternoon. And hopefully, just by having the different speakers' contributions, we can get to the bottom of some of these issues in terms of what might be the problems, what might be some of the solutions that we could share with other practitioners and leaders. And so the 5 different challenges that we're going to be covering, they're going to be things to do with technology. There's going to be things to do with student engagement. There's going to be things to do with challenges relating to workforce, and then there are things to do with budgets and resource allocation, and then also professional development opportunities. And so really looking forward to having that conversation with the 3 of you about these things. And so I thought we'll start with something that is probably one of the biggest topics at the moment, and it's to do with technology. And so the first challenge we're going to be talking about is going to be technological disruption that's caused by some of these sort of innovations that have been going around in the past couple of years or longer even. And so my first question, just to kick off the debate, I'm going to send that to you, Andre, if that's okay. How will AI impact or shape education from your perspective?
Well, that's a very, very big question, because technology is a big word, and then the impact has many different dimensions. So maybe if we start with one aspect that is currently a big thing in the Netherlands, and that's the use of AI in at universities, at our university, for instance, because the two biggest things are students tend to use AI to write work, and then if you assess that work, what are you assessing as a teacher? That's one, and another one is we give our students writing assignments as a learning activity. We think writing and thinking, good writing, good thinking are related. So if students don't use their own skills, but use the computer, they're not really learning. So those are the two big issues at our university at this moment. And I think if you look at the impact, so I think what will happen in the short term is that the tests will change. So the prompts for writing assignments. And I think the assignments, the coursework assignments will change. But how exactly, we don't know yet. We're in the process of that.
Okay, cool. I think at this point, probably good just to get a kind of overview from all three of you. So I'll come to Lucy next, if that's cool. So how do you think AI will impact or shape education from your perspective?
Well, I agree, Andre, that's a very big question. But I think it'll definitely affect education, because I think AI is going to affect society. And really, without wanting to make a big question even bigger, it boils down to what we think the purpose of education is. And if the purpose of education is to prepare young people for modern society, then I think there has to be a degree of education embracing the changes that are going to happen with modern society. And of course, that comes with checks and balances. Certainly, I run a through school, so it's from ages 2 to 19, and the rise of AI used to manipulate information for young people, particularly around global politics, is definitely a concern. But rather than shrink back from that and say it's something that must be taboo or bad or something they're going to navigate when they're 18 or 21, I think we really do have to step into the space, and we really do have to realise that we're going to have to skill up educators so that a lot of the digital immigrants, depending on what age you are, we're not digital natives. We've got to make sure that we understand the world in which young people are growing up and navigating. And I think, yes, there's lots of dangers and pitfalls and threats to AI, but equally there's going to be lots of benefits. And I think we've got to be open-minded about how we embrace it, because, you know, we occasionally get correspondence from people warning us about trying to ban or warning us, encouraging us to ban technology, and nearly all that correspondence comes via email. So we have to be very careful of adults on phones and computers saying that children need to get off phones and computers, and I think that feeds into the AI debate as well.
Okay, and Steve, what's your take on it?
Well, when you gave me the heads up, this might be a topic, I had a panic attack. I'm in my 50s, and a man of a certain age. I didn't have a computer in school. Everyone in the year below me had computer science. So I panicked. So I just Googled what might be the benefits of AI for education. And these are the first three top results according to Google. The Economist says AI can transform education for the better. The Times says AI is a clear and present danger to education. And The Guardian says Estonia eschews phone bans in school. So I think what's really clear is that AI, mobile phone technology, other technologies that come into play, there's no consensus about whether they're a good thing or a bad thing. And that's not surprising, because actually what they are simply tools. And I think good schools that have a really clear idea of what they're about, what they want for their children, what they think teaching and learning is about, they can use these as tools. So we've discussed, how can we possibly use them? So the Senko turns around and says, well, actually, we use PowerPoint quite a lot in our classrooms. So what we can do is we can drop PowerPoint into an AI program and say, right, we need the reading age to be lowered down consistently to say age 7 or whatever it is, and it will just do that for us. We might need to edit it slightly afterwards because it isn't always great, but it will do that for us. There's also generative AI products that are useful for retrieval practice. So there are lots of schools that do retrieval practice and memory tasks for pupils, and of course with this generative, it will pick up where the weaknesses are, what needs to be rehearsed and repeated, and so that they gain fluency. So as with all of these things, there tends to be a moral panic with anything new that comes in. It is the end of civilization as we know it, according to the Times. However, I think with a bit of careful thought and tact, that actually it can be a really powerful learning tool. The only thing I would say is I don't see it particularly as a bandwagon, because I think education fundamentally is a human activity. I don't think computers or AIs will replace it, or even worse, if AI was able to replace it, I don't think I want to live in a world where that was possible. So there you go.
Yeah. So coming back to you, Lucy, because I think you were kind of implying what your answer might be for my follow-up question is whether you think AI is a force for good or not. Are we going to get some kind of net gain from this, or is it still quite uncertain?
I mean, it's definitely still uncertain, but I do think particularly some of the strategies that Steve has just outlined there, it can be used to advance, workload reform, or it can be used to advance aspects of the teaching practice. But like almost any new invention, it isn't the invention itself, it's how it's used, and it's against what metric or what set of values. And as I said, it's certainly in secondary schools, it's a very hot topic that children shouldn't have mobile phones or shouldn't have access to technology so readily. And I think that is actually, for me, a safeguarding risk to try and push the use of phones and the use of access to the internet underground. I think places children in more danger than if they're being taught how to choose to and want to use them properly, or we're creating a cliff edge when they get into adulthood. So I think I think it can be a net gain, but we've not, that moral panic. I agree with Steve. We've got to avoid trying to be hysterical over children entering the modern world, because if we fail to prepare them for that, that will be more of a danger.
Okay. Andre, what do you think to that?
I was thinking when you introduced the topic, you talked about technological disruptions, which so the frame is a negative one. AI is here to stay. We can be sure of that, and I agree with Lucy that we need to prepare students for a world that is full of AI. Now, as schools, as teachers, we're not very good at leading. We're more followers than leaders when it comes to new technology. So I think at least on our side of the North Sea, we're still struggling to address the disruptive nature of AI in learning. So we've not reached the point where we embrace AI as a possibility to enhance learning, which I think we should be doing. But as I said, traditionally we're more reactive learners, so we do stuff that comes our way, and rather than proactively think about how could we adapt our education system beforehand.
Okay, Steve, what do you think to Lucy's point about phones? When it comes to smartphones, what should we do with them? Because the reason why I think this is a particularly timely topic is because some countries, as we know it, like Australia, is starting to ban them, and some people have claimed that it has made quite a positive impact in terms of what students feel like, or in terms of like what they actually end up doing in the classroom. So, how do you feel about phones?
Okay, so we in our school, we don't ban mobile phones. Okay, and there's two reasons, I guess, for doing that. The first reason is, as Lucy said, you don't just want to push it underground. They are a product that children have with them most of the time. And secondly, is that our pupils have a particular need where they need to feel connected to their support network outside of schools and outside the school. And what we've found is, if we were to ban mobile phones, that actually has a detrimental impact on their learning. It has a detrimental impact on their well-being, and it has a detrimental impact on their attendance. Because if they feel that they can't get hold of mum or a carer or whoever it is when they need to, that they just won't come in. But our school's a very particular case in point. I think the key thing is to teach children how to use mobile phones. Okay, so like the obvious things, that how you communicate to somebody on WhatsApp is exactly the same as you'd be communicating them in a room. And just because it's over a phone doesn't mean that you can use language or talk in a way that wouldn't be appropriate to somebody when you're there in a room. They need to know that the content on the internet and through phones needs to be mediated, not just stuff that's illegal, but we've made as a country the UK has made some very particular decisions over the past 10, 15 years. Okay. And I can remember as a teacher saying to kids, if you don't know or understand something, just look it up on the internet. And of course, that's exactly what happened. And it wasn't necessarily mediated. So actually teaching children how to use the information they can come across, how to communicate in the digital space is really, really important. But we wouldn't ban phones. And I think that these studies you're referring to, where other countries have, there's more evidence coming through where actually they're saying it's ambiguous. It doesn't necessarily make an impact on well-being. It doesn't necessarily make an impact on a positive impact on learning.
Okay, so I'm gonna push back a little bit here, just because, like, I feel I've been a bit awkward and cynical, because I'm thinking like bullying is a real issue, and obviously when it comes to using smartphones in the classroom, and where students have a device that can film other students and things like that, and then which some students have used that materials online to bully other students. Now, obviously, I totally agree with you in terms of we can educate them to make sure that they know how to use their phone properly. But the cynical side of me just sort of like, well, not everyone is always going to stick to that. And so what do you think the balance should lie when it comes to whether somebody should have a phone with them or not? Because we know that problem is real, and yes, we know that we can educate them. We shouldn't push it underground. But then, how do we deal with that issue that could happen, and obviously that wouldn't affect the other students?
You're absolutely right. And one of the problems with phones being used by bullies is it can become a 24/7 issue. So if it's face-to-face bullying, you can always walk away from it. But if it's on the phone, you can't so easily. So you're right, it is a problem. However, okay, if those bullies are going to bully, they're going to be bullying anyway. Okay. And thirdly, if a phone has been used in terms of bullying or other antisocial behaviour, then that ought to be treated as, from my perspective, that's just treated as a behaviour issue, full stop. So we wouldn't do a blanket ban on phones, but if phones are used inappropriately, then there's a consequence for the pupil, as there would be if they were bullying anybody else under any other circumstances.
Okay.
And
So
if I could just add on to that, I think we've got to be really careful legislating to the lowest common denominator. If we start setting our education policies for the exceptions or the outliers or the people who are in a certain scenario, because I don't know what it was like in other European countries, but if you hear stories of the 80s and 90s education, there were horrendous things going on behind bike sheds and on playing fields. And, this idea that somehow we've left the halcyon days of a bully-free education environment and that WhatsApp or Snapchat or Instagram is now the root of it, is just not accurate. And I think, as Steve has said, there are always children who are going to make poor choices. Do we want to take away their vehicles of being able to enact their behaviour? And so you're going to have to wait till you're 18 and then go unregulated, unpoliced into the digital stratosphere to, behave completely inappropriately. And I think we have to set the bar higher for ourselves than that. And of course, technology can be abused. As Andre's mentioned, it can be misused in terms of plagiarism. But Shakespeare and Marlowe fought cases around plagiarism. Plagiarism and antisocial behaviour and bullying have happened for hundreds of years. And I think when we lay it at the door of technology, we're doing ourselves a disservice.
Well, Andre, I'm going to come to you next, because obviously, what do you think?
Well, our government has just said no more phones in classrooms. And most teachers that I speak, they're very happy with that, because it's easier to... So the government has said, it's a very strong advice, but they will not check if children are using the phones in school. But what teachers will tell you, it's impossible to compete with TikTok or Instagram. So we're not talking so much about the bullying thing, but the attention for what's happening in the classroom. If you're trying to teach and half the children are watching clips, it's very difficult to teach them anything. So it's on a more basic level than the bullying, the relatedness aspect. I would have no problem with sending my children to a school that bans telephones from being used in the classroom. In addition, what they found, because now there's lots of research going on as to the effects of banning. What they found was that the academic success is improving, but also that in the playground, so that these are the schools that also ban phones from being used in the break. Children are communicating again and doing stuff together rather than sit and watch their little screens. So I think it's not either you ban them or you educate children. I think you could do a combination of the two. You ban them when they're not appropriate, and you educate them. Full stop.
Lucy, do you think that sounds like about the pragmatic kind of like compromise that you think might work?
I think it comes back to me for choose to want to. So at break times at Car Manor, where mobile phones are not banned, the children are talking to each other and engaging with activities, because we talk to children about the importance of relationships, and we make sure that there are activities that are more interesting than being on their phone. So the children choose to connect with each other in the same way that if we were all sat in a room together, the four of us wouldn't go on our phones because we're adults, and we get that would be antisocial with three people that we've just met. But I just think the word ban is, and yeah, obviously, if children are on phones in classrooms and not being taught, but that's actually a behaviour issue. If a school has lost that level of control, the children would be staring out the window or not listening, It's about children, and the rule here is that phones must not disrupt learning, but children can take them out to scan QR codes to get their timetable. There's a whole raft of access to technology that makes sense to the child. They can have appointments for parent consultations that go straight into their parents' diary or their diary. So I think it's definitely, though, setting the bar high enough so that they understand that the limitations of technology and the dangers of it, because it does not beat human connection by any means.
Okay, well, I think that's good to sort of be like the last point, I suppose, for this particular theme. Obviously, as you have all said at the beginning, this is like a very big question, and when it comes to technology and how that might be used in education, whether it's a force for good or whether it's going to create a lot of issues. And so I think for now we'll park that, but then moving on to the next theme or the next challenge. I think again this is quite sort of relevant to what we've been talking about, but I suppose as student engagement is a big topic as well, and it's also something that has been highlighted by a lot of research to say, in terms of student engagement, it's becoming quite a big issue, especially since COVID, and student engagement in particular, the UK or some other Western countries, it has been highlighted as a major issue for teachers when it comes to engaging students. And so I suppose when it comes to improving student engagement, what would you guys think? What do you guys think would make the biggest difference? I know there are many, many different factors that are involved when it comes to student engagement, but if you have to name a couple of factors that are really significant, and I'm more interested in that kind of macro level type of factors as well. So rather than saying, well, student engagement is something teachers individually can do these different things to improve, but more like at organizational level or at a kind of national level, what can actually be the biggest influential factors when it comes to that. So Steve, I'll come back to you first, if that's okay.
Well, I don't think this is a COVID problem. I think this is something that's been coming our way since about 2010 as a big tidal tsunami, and has just got steadily worse, and COVID's probably just made it more apparent than where it's gone from. I think in terms of student engagement and well-being, they're like, for me, just three key words: meaning, agency, and autonomy. And meaning is really, really important. The kids have to know why they're going to school, what's in it for them, what's the purpose. Yes, you can break that down into smaller bits, like things like project-based. Should we do project-based learning, or should it be more a traditional academic curriculum? But that's not the point. What they need to know is, what is the meaning of education? Why are they there? What's the purpose of them going to school, and what are they actually learning? The agency and autonomy is to do with them having some measure and degree of control of what it is they're doing. Okay, they have to take ownership of their schooling at some level and in some way, and they have to have the permission to be able to take control of their learning at some way and stage in some way, and they actually have to have the ability to do so. So when they become more active and less passive, when they've got that meaning about thinking about what is the purpose of education, why am I here, why do I get up in the morning and come to school, and when they develop that agency and autonomy, then they'll be more engaged, and there'll be greater well-being. There's a fair amount of research that says is that children with lower socioeconomic social standing, what they tend to do is they tend to look at their environment around them, and they think that it controls them. And no matter how talented they are or what they can do, they think they're fixed. And richer students, it's the flip side. So the more students you've got who are working in greater levels of poverty, the less agency, the less autonomy, and the meaning just tends to evaporate. So that's what I'd do, if that's macro enough for you.
Okay. Yep. Lucy?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo a lot of that. I think I don't think it's COVID. I think it's Gov in the English system that's caused the issue. We have one of the narrowest curriculums. And if you look at, we've been talking earlier about the advancement of technology. And if you look and compare the English education system, certainly, we've barely changed since the 1950s. We still teach children in boxes of 30 determined by their date of birth. And the curriculum has barely changed. We flirt with skills or vocational technology, but there's still a disappointing level of snobbery around children who are on technical courses or vocational courses, and all the courses that we actually need for a thriving economy in a thriving country. And the children understand that when they can access knowledge so quickly and readily at their fingertips, to ask to be engaged in a curriculum that is at best cognitive overload for most of the time, to then be put through, the GCSE series have just finished in the UK, where children will have sat between 20 and 30 assessments, which are predominantly about measuring how successful adults and institutions are, rather than about keys to open doors for young people. So on some level, I have a lot of empathy with a child who's not engaged in that curriculum, because I don't think we're doing them a good service at the minute. I do agree with autonomy. I think there's more independence for young people than ever, in some ways. And I think, therefore, when they feel that school is done to them rather than with them, it jars with some of the other aspects of their life. And I think that's a human connection, a human thing anyway, the autonomy. When we feel that we're driving our own destiny or we're more in control of it, we can be more engaged. So I think a significant amount of careers, education advice and guidance is one of the strategies at a national or an organisational level that would improve student engagement. So that children can see the relevancy of why they're learning what they're learning. And that doesn't mean that everything has to be transactional and lead to a job or employment. There is a love of learning. There is just knowing something because it's good to learn something new. But I think we've got to get over our snobbery of skills and vocational learning. We've got to stop somehow thinking that learning the violin is better than learning BMX, or learning ancient Greek is better than learning a BTEC in computer science. And I think if we do that, then student engagement will follow. But I think it's the education system that isn't engagement worthy, rather than the fault being that of the young people.
So now, interestingly, I think like the next logical person to go to is Andre, just because in the Netherlands, from my knowledge, there's a big emphasis on vocational education for certain students. And so clearly it's not quite the same as what we have in terms of a system like in the UK. So I wonder, how would you do you want to respond to what Lucy just said about the kind of focus on particular types of sort of curriculum related themes?
Yeah, well, I think the snobbery that you mentioned is we have that as well. Although the system is different, I think you'll find it anywhere. One of the research projects that I'm involved with is we look for patterns within schools, and one of the things we found was that patterns are echoes of other patterns. So if you're in a school where the management is very directive, you can expect teachers to be very directive to pupils. If you live in a country where the government is very strict on education, and you have an Ofsted that is very strict in terms of what you should be doing, then chances are that schools will be modelled likewise. I think the countries that do really well are the countries that give schools and teachers a lot of autonomy. And that leads to children, pupils, learners, students who have autonomy. We were in Estonia some time ago, and we visited a school. There was an arts class, and we were really amazed by the fantastic work that the students had done. And these were 13, 14, 15-year-olds. So we asked the person who was guiding us around, can we meet the teacher? Because, the teacher who made this possible. And then they told us, no, the teacher's been sick for 4 months now. And the children just, they came to school, they did their thing, which would be impossible in the Dutch situation. Now, Estonia has a system where there's much more trust in teachers than the Dutch, or I think the British system. So it's complicated.
Okay, yeah. So now I think we've got a question here from the audience. So Lucy mentioned a level of snobbery towards vocational courses and training, linking this back to the previous topic with very real discussions going on about the impact of AI on the job market. Do the panel think we need to do more to address this? AI is far more likely to replace my job than a plumber. Lucy, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'm hopeful that AI won't replace teachers, because we're such fantastic, or educators rather, we're such fantastic multi-skilled people, where in the course of imparting knowledge or developing skills or helping understanding, we can also address misconceptions and do the whole pedagogy, but also at the same time recognise when somebody's not themselves, when there's something else going on for them, when there's a safeguarding issue, when there's a friendship issue. And I don't know if AI is quite at that level yet, clever though it is. I don't think there's an algorithm yet that can unravel the human heart or soul. So I'm optimistic that actually educators and the human face of it's still going to be needed. I do think we're going to have to modernise though. And I think the suggestion around employers, we've got to get the employers' link and their voice heard more in national policy, I feel, in this country, because the curriculum that we've got set, when you mention it to employers, that is not what they want in young people. They don't want graduates leaving that can recite the rivers of the world or the dates of queens and kings in England. They want problem solving. They want people who can collaborate. They want strong oracy skills and communication skills. They want good interpersonal skills. They want self-esteem, but not arrogance. They want a whole collection of things that I don't think our curriculum is yet developing. So, but yeah, I'm not ready to give in to the pessimism that AI will replace us just yet.
Yeah. But then all the things that you just mentioned, or most of the things you just mentioned, require a redesign of our education. So the outcomes of education. And again, I think we tend to be more followers of what's happening than leaders. So there's a responsibility for us.
Okay, right. Well, because I'm conscious of time, I'm going to move on to the next question, still within this challenge of student engagement and well-being. So this one, I'm going to ask Steve if that's okay, because of the school that you work in. So is well-being really a bigger problem than before, or is it because we have more of an awareness now so that it gets more attention?
It's a bigger problem than before. Full stop. So I think well-being is a bigger problem than before for two reasons. The first reason is that the adversity that children face is greater now and has been greater since 2010 than previously. Okay, and there's the ACES research, there's other research that says that if you expose children to these kinds of environments, it will have a negative effect. So that's the first reason why well-being is a bigger problem. The second reason for it is the supportive factors, the resilience factors that would help children navigate their way through those problems have been reduced. So if you were to look, for example, at the numbers of pastoral workers working in school generally, they've been reduced. If you look at the numbers of people in classroom assistants, they've been reduced. If you look at the amount of time that teachers might have to do pastoral work, there is a tendency for that to be reduced, which is linked to financial resource. If you were to look at, say, wider children's services and the preventative work that might have been done, say, through youth work, through family support workers, through early intervention there, through mental health, that's been reduced. If you were to look at the number of Sure Start centres in the country that exist, that's been reduced. So what you've got is two things going on. First thing is children exposed to more risk, and secondly, the well-being and support that would be normally around children and families broader, that's been reduced, and it should come as absolutely no surprise to anybody, okay, that the well-being of our young people has deteriorated.
Lucy, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we should hang our heads in shame at the number of children who live in this country in poverty and the way that's increased over the last 15 years. And, the key barriers to success or human flourishing for young people is rooted in poverty and the kind of overlap of multiple barriers of deprivation. So I think that's a significant issue that is definitely affecting the well-being. I do agree as well that the support services have been continually cut, and I think that really does make a change. But I think there is a media narrative in this country that demonises children, that, whether be it gang violence or be it kind of antisocial behaviour, and the rise of approaches to education that are very much zero tolerance and aggressive and dictatorial and authoritative. It doesn't give the biology we know around how adolescent brains work, and just the experience and the lived institutional knowledge of educators shows that children need boundaries for sure and need routine, but also need space to make mistakes and learn and need to be able to push against those boundaries. And I think, the shift over the last kind of 15 years of the polarization of what makes a successful school and silent corridors, and that there's a real oppression of young people that I think is definitely linked to the fact that we're now seeing that their well-being isn't in a good state. Because I'm not sure we create the conditions for their well-being to thrive.
To be fair, though, silent corridors are cheaper than family support workers and
Yeah, shoving the problems, sweeping them under the carpet and not listening to them definitely does create a longer queue for CAMS or other services. You're right, Steve.
But also, it's not. I don't disagree with you at all in what you said. But that a lot of the stuff that is causing the wellbeing crisis for young people isn't located in the school. It's stuff that's happening in society, wider level, in our towns and in our communities. And it's schools that have to try and pick up the pieces. And if they're not funded properly and not equipped properly, then that narrows the range of responses that they're going to be able to do.
We'll come to that a little bit later. Andre, do you sympathise with what's been said?
Yeah, yes, of course. Well, I think if we may believe the research, the Dutch children are amongst the happiest in the world. we don't have silent corridors. Many teachers not so happy with that, but so that I think there is a difference. But and there is one thing I can see how deprived children could be, suffer more from this thing than rich children. But the rich children are not all that happy either. I think the world is a more complicated place to live in than it used to be, and there is much more stress than there used to be, no matter how wealthy your parents are.
Okay, well, before we move on to the third challenge, I just thought I'm going to throw this at the three of you, just in case one of you has an answer for it. What's the most important issue affecting student engagement and well-being that nobody's talking about?
I think for me, it's meaning. Okay, which I know sounds really abstract, but it's children actually thinking about what's in it for them. Why am I here? What's the purpose of education for me? It's not just transactional. Obviously, as a parent of three teenagers, I'm really hopeful they'll get a job or do successfully in life as well. But there's more to it as well. It's about learning about themselves. It's about learning about the wider world. It's learning about what it means to be human. It's about learning about the complexity of human life in societies and the physical world, all that kind of stuff that goes with it. And that sense of education, the wider sense, has been really lost. Because I think sometimes if you just take it down to the transactional level of, work hard and you might get a job out at the end of it, while they can look around and say, well, actually, either the job I want doesn't require grade 6s and 7s, or I can't see any particular jobs around there, but education's more than that.
Okay.
I mean,
anything else?
I don't think it's not necessarily something that people aren't talking about, but I do think it's a misconception, is that children aren't bothered. It links to the well-being. Children are really worried. They're really worried about the climate, more significantly than a lot of the adults who are interacting with them understand. Genuine anxiety. Again, in this country, significantly worried about whether they're ever going to be able to afford a house, which again opens up an interesting cultural debate about whether that is needed, but it is in our culture something that's deemed as a kind of brand of success. They're worried that they're going to get a job. They're worried that they're going to be safe. And when we speak to children, and we do a lot of pupil voice about what children want, it comes back the same thing time and time again. And it's never a theme park, and it's never a swimming pool, and it's never free trips to the local restaurant or anything like that. They say they want somewhere safe to be able to be with their friends outside of school. They want a safe place where they can connect to other young people, and they don't want a PlayStation, and they don't want to be gaming or any of that. That's what they want. And it's been like that for about the last decade. So I think in terms of engagement, whilst it's not something that people aren't talking about, it is something that people misunderstand. Young people care about their futures. They're not disengaged with their futures. They're just overwhelmed and intimidated by how to find a pathway through that.
Okay.
Unfortunately, they don't see school necessarily as being the answer to it.
Yeah, far too often.
Okay, so the third challenge then, let's move on to that. And that's related to workforce related challenges, like, teachers feeling like they're burnt out, workload issues, we've got staff shortage problems in many different settings. And so, and this is where I'm thinking that maybe we're all going to see it a little bit differently in terms of my question is, why are we seeing all these workforce-related problems, and what do you think is the root cause?
No, I think it links with what we said in the previous chapter. Well-being of students and well-being of teachers are linked. They live in the same world.
Yeah, I agree. There is actually something called the Dworkin Teacher Burnout Scale. If anybody wants to use it, 10 questions you can ask teachers with a Likert scaling so you can work out how close somebody is to burnout. I did it myself, but I don't feel confident in sharing the results. And the questions all basically are based around the things we've been talking about. Do teachers think that them going to school, that they're going to help create a better world? So what's the vocation? What's the meaning and the purpose of it? Do they have any sort of a sense of agency and autonomy that they're able to make decisions about their own working environment and having an impact there on the children? Are there relationships? Are they in connection, I suppose, with leaders? Rather, it would be a better way of putting it. Is there a sort of good, strong working relationship between them, or are they just simply being told what to do? And they'll come out of it as no surprise to anybody that if you score and give a sort of worldview where you think it doesn't matter to the children whether you're there or not, you don't have any say in how you can control your own working environment any way, shape, scale or form. And if the leaders are just telling you what they're doing and taking away all sense of agency, you get close to burnout very, very quickly.
So what's the problem here, Steve? So what is it that is causing this? Like, why are we having teachers feeling like if they have got no agency, why is it that they're being like having this perception of not having any autonomy, or even maybe the fact that they actually don't have autonomy, not just the fact that they feel like if they haven't got autonomy? Why do you think that is?
I think there's a number of reasons. I think there's a lack of support of schools, full stop. So the middle tier in England, the funding for it, the support for it has more or less evaporated. So the only funded body you've got now is Ofsted, which is a regulatory body, and it's not there to improve things. It's simply there to measure how well people are doing. We'll sort of leave that there. There's the second thing behind it, I suppose, is as from my perspective, as from what I've seen, as funding has been reduced, that's put a pressure upon leaders to think about what constitutes efficiency. And the idea that if you've got schools and people where they're doing similar kinds of things at the same time, those decisions are being taken away from teachers, that might be more efficient financially and efficient as well. We have a knowledge-rich curriculum, which in some ways has benefits for staff and pupils, but I'm not sure how consistently we've thought through how that's to be delivered in the best way or constructed in the best way. So that can feel like you're just having to get through a whole slog of stuff. You know, it's just one thing after the other. So your room for maneuver there is narrowed. And also, if you're dealing with children, it takes a lot of work. If you're dealing with children who might be vulnerable or not necessarily engaged or being successful in their education, where you can think you can make a difference with them, you know, that's really, really hard as well. So there's mainstream schools with very high numbers of EHC pupils with EHC plans, and if they haven't thought through fully about what's the best way to approach those, deal with those, then that can feel like a restriction there as well. Sorry, that was a bit of a ramble, wasn't it?
Lucy, do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I think, unfortunately, we're obsessed with what we can measure and quantify in education. So the level of scrutiny, the level of bureaucracy, and it links a little bit to the workload, because in trying to alleviate workload, I think we've reduced trust and autonomy. So there's centralised planning. There's ways of marking, you know, a burdensome assessment load is ridiculous for teachers, but actually looking at your students' work should be one of the most gratifying processes of the teaching and learning process, you should argue, rather than, oh my goodness, I've got all these assessments to mark. But that's the difference, you see, whether we're marking assessments or whether we're celebrating and looking for learning. And certainly I think the current system, you know, it starts as young as 4 when we start weighing children metaphorically, and it continues with phonics and times table checks and benchmark after benchmark. And the children, you know, it's exactly what Amjo said, the pressure that are on the young people affecting their well-being is the same for the adults who are trying to deliver against those tests. And I think the metrics are just too narrow of what constitutes success in education. So the difference that you could make to a child, the light bulb moments, unless it translates to an Ofsted grade or a Progress 8 score, these abstract things that don't matter to individual young people, then teaching can feel like an awful lot of effort without the right recognition. And I think we've got to really work hard to try and enable teachers to have that trust and autonomy, that they know their children well and can support their learning. But our obsession with benchmarks, is one of the reasons that at times the profession can feel burdensome if that is used with the wrong type of leadership, if that's used in a toxic environment as a stick to beat staff with.
Now I've got a follow-up.
The but bit.
Sorry,
hang on, I'm going to
go for it.
I'm going to the but bit. Don't disagree with what you said, but I also think there is a weakness in some of the leadership courses that we go on, where they don't actually explicitly teach leaders how to think about how to create, teach agency, autonomy, and trust. So, for example, we're really lucky in our school because we have got outside accountability. We've also got a strong sense of internal accountability. So in terms of outcomes for us, 5 qualifications at GCSE is really important, because if a kid can get that, either 5 level 1s, 5 level 2s, then what those are is their passport for their next steps. And a successful educational experience is a resilience factor in itself. But we're allowed to be a bit, I can't think of another word other than sneaky. So on a Wednesday afternoon, in our school, no teacher teaches, and that's on top of our PPA allowance. And the reason for that is because on a Wednesday afternoon, the pastoral staff do a lovely course called Wow Wellbeing on Wednesday. It's sequential, it's thought through, there's a schema, blah, 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 but they have responsibility for it. And what that enables us to do is we can, on a Wednesday afternoon within directed time, is say, right, what we'll do is we will systematically plan to build up teacher collaboration and teacher agency. Now, sometimes it is panic moments, like it's the year 11 GCSEs coming up. We need to make sure we've got all our exam entries. As a school, we operate 3 exam centres, and it gets a bureaucratic nightmare. So there is that part of stuff that goes on, the managerial stuff. But what we can do is we can use that time to get a group of teachers together and just focus on one kid. And pick apart what's worked, what's not worked, why is it, what's the learning, how can we generalize from that and extrapolate from that. We can do internal professional development, where we just might say do a bit of a lesson study. We might together get down as a team and think, right, okay, we found the kids, they might need to do more problem solving, AO3 stuff in maths. Okay, what have we got, what can we pull together, what you've done, what I've done, what we shared, and you can, and that can take place. And that's all we think beneficial, really good stuff. But it doesn't happen by accident. Right? It happens by design.
Right. I've got a couple of questions just to sort of finish off this third challenge. The first one is for Andre. Is AI a potential solution to teachers' workload issues in your from your perspective? Because obviously, like we know AI to be mostly as like an efficiency kind of tool, and if workload issue is something that clearly is a big thing both in the UK and in the Netherlands, affecting teacher retention, do you think AI has any part to play in solving that problem, or do you think actually the problem isn't with efficiency per se?
Well, the teacher well-being again is a complex concept with lots of different dimensions, and workload is one of them, and having no autonomy is another one. But if we look at the first part of the question, do I think AI can play a role in reducing workload? Yes, I do. I think it will. But that's not the problem we're talking about here and now. Because the issue here is, I think it's the three things that Steve mentioned. Meaning, autonomy, agency. They are requirements for pupils. They are basic needs for teachers as well. So I think you should look at those three, and then you should look at AI and how it can help improve education. But I think those are two. One is not the solution for the other.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Lucy, I've got one for you, just because I'm aware that your setting doesn't have a teacher retention problem like the rest of the sector, if you like. And so I would probably say that it's quite safe for me to say that it's like, it's untypical. And so just wondering if you can offer any advice when it comes to, how do you keep your teachers? How come they want to stay with you? And across the road, a different school would have such a different problem.
I think a lot of it echoes what's already been said, in that when we feel that there's pressure points, we don't necessarily look to reduce the work. We look to increase the support, and we certainly look to maintain high levels of purpose. Because actually people feel that they understand why they're being asked to do something. And particularly it's got that direct correlation to the impact it's going to have on a young person, their family, or the community. Then actually people's capacity to do a busy, demanding job that does, I think, involve investment of the personal as well as the professional, people's capacity to do that and work with young people is vast, and they find it rewarding rather than stressful. I mean, there are some operational things that we do. So our quality assurance is very peer-led. We invite very much people wanting to be observed with a young person they may find challenging, or a lesson they find challenging. We really celebrate mistakes. We celebrate getting stuck. If somebody asks for help, we see that as a real strength rather than arrive with a clipboard. So we encourage risk-taking. And when it goes wrong, we celebrate that we took the risk, provided that's all done in a safe way. So I think our performance management is very much done in a collaborative way, where people present a portfolio. Wherever possible, we try to make the process of being an educator collaborative rather than punitive and competitive. And we put a lot of effort into the adults. So some of the mechanisms we have around pastoral support for the young people, the young people are in circle groups of about 10 children, or with a designated adult that they meet with 3 times a week. We have a similar system for the adults, where they will have a support circle that they meet with the first thing on a Monday morning before the week starts. And we check in and ask them how their weekend has been, because we think recognising that people are human beings before they are a teacher is really important. And we all bring our personal work to life. We shouldn't bring our private life, but we do bring our personal, particularly if you're working in a people-centred or a young person-centred world. So, there's some conscious strategies. Hopefully it's a culture that we've built. It's not happened overnight. But one thing I think we mustn't do when we talk about the challenges of educating is try and, one strategy that a trust in this country's used is they've turned it into a 9-day fortnight and said, and I just think that's the wrong thing. That says the job is so hard, we have to make you there less. Your job is such a negative experience, the little time, as long as we can trim it down to your least at work. I just think that that's the wrong message. Of course, the work should be doable. People absolutely need a work-life balance, and you shouldn't have to give your life over if you want to work in education. But I think there is a balance, and we've just to be careful around how we pitch it, which is more moral purpose, more understanding of what we're doing, less bureaucracy, less counting things that don't count, and more investment in the human beings, including the big human beings as well as the small human beings.
Brilliant. Okay, so moving on to the fourth challenge, and this is to do with limited budgets and resources allocation. And so I'm just wondering what you think about when it comes to the limited budgets that we face in education right now, which I think applies to both the UK and the Netherlands, from what I'm seeing, maybe to some extent in the school sector, maybe less so. Is it mostly about us not getting enough money from the government, or are there ways to make the money that we get go further?
I think I think it's a case of we're not getting enough money. But I think we need to be really realistic. We need to be realistic about where the finances are. So we have an aging population. There are more old people now than young people. There are reducing numbers of children. We have an increasingly sick population, so there's more pools in the NHS. In Lincolnshire, it's a rural population, and that's got consequences in itself. The middle tier is not being funded at all in any way, shape or form. So there's been lots of stuff in the press about multi-academy trusts and central teams taking away money from frontline service in the classroom. And then there's in Schools Week an article that said they've worked out that actually the top size from local authorities is about 9% of budgets, and there was a tumbleweed moment because nobody felt like responding to that one. From our point of view, we've got a budget roughly about 3 million a year. We've got a carry forward of about 280,000. Last year we had a small in-year surplus around about somewhere between 20 and 15,000. And if you look at our 5-year financial plan, in 5 years' time, we're completely bankrupt and would have to close if nothing changes, because we've been told to factor in increases in costs for staffing, increases in staff, increases in cost for energy and everything else, but no assumption that funding is going to increase. And what that tells me as a head teacher is just stop worrying about it, because that's telling me that the level of the problem is bigger than what's being managed in a single school. But fundamentally, I think it's a case of we're not getting enough money. But what the answer and the solution is, I'm not sure, because it's not, the environment is not within our favour.
Lucy, what do you think?
I agree with that. We definitely aren't getting enough money, and there's been increases that have just been unfunded. So as the costs of everything have got more expensive for schools and colleges and universities, the income has reduced. So that's just basic maths, that the gap when we need it most is getting bigger. But I think we are still limited in our thinking, particularly in mainstream secondary schools and primary schools, in that we work in isolation. Where Carman is part of an organisation called the Leeds Learning Alliance, which is a group of third sector businesses, FE, HE, private companies, and there's a real will to collaborate out there. There's a real will to fund things from, private sector or for third sector to join up. And I think there is a limiting factor around how used to working in silos we are, and really could try and maximise the resource by some effective partnership working. But that is really secondary to the fact that I agree. It's all about priority, isn't it? And I just don't think there's been enough prioritising of education funding over the last 10, 15 years.
So on that, Lucy, are we actually putting resources in the right place or not?
I think the most recent investment in early years is the right place. The kind of whole 0 to 3 agenda. I think if we get that right, and I'm really would be interested to hear what Andre has to say around, when we're talking about the happiness of children in different countries. I think some of our European counterparts will do a better job of those first 3 years, 5 years, of 7 years, and what they comprise of, and whether it's play and development or whether it's assessment, and are you at the right benchmark or milestone. So I think I'm hoping that there's a bit of a swing towards us starting to invest, because it's so much easier to close gaps and reduce barriers for children when they're not entrenched, when you've been able to work with the family and work with the young person earlier. So I'm cautiously optimistic that resources are starting to go towards the right priority.
Andre, what is it like for you when it comes to the kind of limited budgets and whether we're putting the money in the right place? What's that like in the Netherlands?
Well, if you don't have much money and you really need to think about where to invest, then I think it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, it's education. At the same time, I agree with Steve's analysis that the world is changing. You can't spend money that doesn't exist. So maybe we could use this crisis to rethink our education system. Because I think when you talk about efficiency, I don't think of efficiency in terms of how can you make sure that Johnny has a higher mark on I don't know, geography, but it's about the question of how can you make schools do what they are supposed to do, prepare children for society, and I think we can do a more efficient job in that respect.
Mm. But so obviously, like the Dutch, as you have reminded me many times, are known to be pragmatic, right? And so, knowing that there is a physical limit, as you have just pointed out, and in terms of like central funding, it's always going to be outside of our control mainly. In your view, what should we prioritize when it comes to allocating resources that we have, even though it is limited?
Well, one of the things that we find in Amsterdam is we've got a new education industry where the parents, the rich parents, buy extra education for their children to make sure they do better in tests that are used to determine where kids go. We've seen an enormous increase in the number of advisors, consultants, etc., etc. I think if all the people that say they work in education, we would not have teacher shortages anymore. Moreover, for instance, when you talk about teacher shortages, some teachers now don't work for schools, but they work for agencies, and agencies sell the teachers to the highest bidder, which means that schools spend a lot more money for less people. So maybe there's a solution there.
Steve, what do you think of that?
We too have parents who purchase extra units of education, but they tend to send the children to separate schools to everybody else. I genuinely don't know. I think early years is a real priority. If you can close the gap, as it were, in early years, you can make. If the theory is you can make a big, long-lasting impact. What concerns me about that is I suspect what you're going to have to do is the resources you hit within early years for particularly vulnerable children, you're going to have to keep on using as they move through the school system to ensure that they don't go wandering off track again. I think that there's definitely something about partnership with the third sector in particular. And the private sector. I mean, we set up a charity. We've got a mobile bus, hopefully going to be operating from September to go and do some pastoral work with pupils who are stuck in their home and with them within some mainstream schools as well. But it's not a panacea because actually the funding sources for stop are drying up. So, where there's been charities beforehand. So, for example, in Lincolnshire, the Bromhead charity, which is a medical charity, that's decided to give all its money away. Other charities, Wolfson, I think, was doing big grants and then decided actually we haven't got it anymore. They're drying up. Do private institutions, and they might have the will, but do they have the resource as well? I think we're going to have to think carefully about how we organise our system. As well,
Steve, if I may interrupt you,
yeah,
it's amazing to hear that as a school you'd have to depend on charity.
No, we're not depending on it. What we've done is we've set something up to do some work outside the work of the school.
I mean, I praise you for finding the extra funds.
Yeah, it's not out.
I mean, if you need the services, they should be available for you from the taxpayers' money.
I don't particularly want to go down this rabbit hole or get drawn out there. But it's not to do with the work of our school. It's not for the children within our school. It's for something else. We've set something up, working in collaborations as a virtuous thing for other people. So what I wouldn't want this has been recorded is people to walk out and think, oh no, the Pilgrim School set up a charity to supplement their own income.
No,
That's not the case.
I think it also links to with what you said, Lucy, about having sponsors in the form of companies. I would be all in favour of it if the sponsoring would mean the companies would open their doors and you take the children there so they can have a view of what the world looks like, things like that. But a public service like schools are, they shouldn't depend on gifts. Yeah, and especially not from companies.
Yeah, and we also still depend on the generosity of other families. So when we run extracurricular activities, there's an opportunity where you can pay you could pay nothing if you can't afford. You can pay what you can pay what it costs, or you can pay in support. And we have lots of families that will buy, I don't know, a theatre ticket for their son or daughter and pay for another, which is a lovely thing. But I agree with you. I don't think our book swaps or uniform swaps, we have a whole load of internal charity to support the community that actually we would struggle without. And I agree with you. We shouldn't be depending on that generosity when it's something as fundamental as the education.
Okay, well, so now going forward then, to sort of finish the debate in this next 20 minutes or so, is to do with the last challenge relating to professional development for leaders and teachers. I think that's a nice kind of way to end the debate by thinking about all of these issues that we've talked about and how some of these issues could be potentially supported by both leaders and teachers. And so obviously that tells me that professional development is quite an important element, or should be quite an important element to the solution. And so in this kind of fast changing landscape that we're in, just how do you guys think practitioners and leaders should be able to keep up with what's going on with professional development?
I mean, I would say one thing we've got to really push is collaboration rather than competition. The minute you rank order schools, the minute you have league tables, it really presents a barrier to schools practitioners in geographical areas, or even with the advancement of technology, online, being able to form networks where best practice can be shared, where research can be shared. I think it does come back to time, which inevitably come back to cost. And there has been an improvement, I must say, I feel, over the last 10 years of research-informed practice, and Steve mentioned earlier, trauma-informed practice, adverse childhood experiences, things like that. But very often, the average school will have 5 training days a year. There's so much to put into those 5, generic things. A lot will be used for whole school messages. And expecting, I think, an educator to work with young people for 6 hours a day full on, and then want to go and spend 2 hours doing research or professional development is challenging. So I think it's back to priorities. We have to make space for it. We start our school day later on a Monday, so that the first 45 minutes of every Monday is professional development built into the curriculum time. And to allow people to explore what they're interested in, rather than a diktat of, this year it's literacy, because that might not be somebody's professional development. And I get there has to be a kind of coherence to school policy and development. But so I think there's got to be more collaboration, less competition, and there's got to be time, space and value given to it's not, if you pay lip service to professional development, then you'll get what you make.
Steve, how do you keep up?
So I think there's a number of things. I think connection's a biggie, that's just been said. Connecting your school within a network of other education providers and other schools is really, really important. The second is internal connection as well, so that you haven't got silos within your own school, so that you've got creation of good practice, which is a naff way of putting it, but I think everybody roughly knows what I mean by that, within your own school. I think deliberately thinking about capacity building within your schools, so thinking about the time that you can allocate, the finances that can be allocating, the skills. So we've got a really rich and mature coaching culture in the schools. We see that's really important. We see lesson study as being really important. So a lot of implicit practice and implicit expertise becomes explicit, so something can be shared right the way across the school, and then if you're scaling up in terms of network, can be exchanged with others. I think although some bits of CPD are technical, so for example phonics, how you teach phonics is technical. There's a right way, there's a wrong way of doing it. A lot of it is actually thinking through about your context, finding time for people to process what it is they're learning. I also think this may be an area, as a self-confessed Luddite, where technology could actually be really important, really useful. So the use of Office 365, the use of Teams for connection across sites, for connection between teams, the idea that what you can do perhaps within a network is create a range of CPD opportunities that might range from this is a 5-minute thing you can do to this is something much more substantial and that can be done, say, within an afternoon. We also put a lot of importance on formal learning that might have no direct, immediate, tangible consequence. So when resources are a little bit better, we had no problem at all in funding people to do master's degrees and things like this and things that they were interested in. Not because that we saw a particular need at a particular time, but actually just by somebody gaining that level of learning and knowledge, it would have an impact for the school further down the route. But it's definitely around connection, definitely around prioritizing, definitely around resourcing, and also being really intentional about making your implicit practice within your own setting explicit and conscious.
Okay. Now, Andre, I've got a separate question for you because I know you've focused on the concept of teacher leadership for quite some time, and so I suppose when it comes to kind of professional development side of it, why do you think teacher leadership matters, and how much agency do you think we'd really have, knowing what we've just talked about in terms of the limitations or the constraints that we're working with? Do you really believe that we have agency or sufficient agency to really kind of do what we would like to kind of aim for, and also to actually professionally develop?
And who's the we in your? Do we have?
I suppose, in terms of education itself as a community, do we, between all of us as practitioners, as leaders, do we really have the agency, especially when it comes to teacher leadership?
Well, if you would summarize everything that we've just talked about, Philip, what do you think the answer is?
Well, I think we've got some level of agency. I'm not so sure if we've got agency in certain things, but I do feel like we probably have more agency than we think. I think we take for granted sometimes, or some people take for granted sometimes, that there are certain things that we can do that we probably tell ourselves that we probably can't do because of the environment, because of the narrative and things like that. I think what happens in the classroom, there is still scope for some of us to do certain things that we probably don't think we can do. But then, I do acknowledge that there are lots of limitations in terms of what we can physically do as a school or as just practitioners in general. But I like to, if we're having to work with that kind of those limitations, I like us to think that we've got more agency so that we can actually try to do certain things that, rather than accepting that we don't have agency and therefore,
So I think we do have that. There are more opportunities for the agency. So there is agency, but we could do more. And if we go back to Steve's Holy Trinity of meaning, autonomy, and agency, I think they go for professional development as well. So, for instance, one of the questions is who owns the agenda? Who determines what the 5 days that you mentioned, Lucy, what the agenda will be there. Is it the school leadership? Is it the government? Is it the teachers themselves? Is it the pupils? Is it the parents? So that's one of those questions. I think that one of the key problems is many teachers are so tired they don't have the energy or the headspace to think about these questions. There's a bit of a paradox there, because to gain back your autonomy and your agency, you need to invest a little bit. And investing is when in times of scarcity, it's difficult to find the time. But I do think the solution is in investing in teacher professionalism, so teachers taking back the autonomy that they deserve and that they need to do their work. Because they are the ones who can make the choices, and they know what they need to succeed, or for the children to succeed.
Lucy,
et cetera.
Do you think we have agency?
I don't think we have as much. I mean, I agree with what's been said in that. Well, we do have agency if you're prepared to go against the grain, if you're prepared to kind of be an outlier. But there are perverse incentives all over the system to dumb down teaching to a manual approach, because then it's quantifiable. And then if there's a teacher crisis, well, let's make being a teacher as easy as possible. Let's kind of put together an idiot's guide to doing it. And, I get some of that's well intentioned. I think some of it is about cost savings rather than genuine investment. But so we end up with a process driven system rather than a values led. So instead of, these are the values that we're going to approach education with, and find your own way to meeting those values or meeting the outcome, it becomes very prescriptive. And that feels very shackled for a teacher to have. Already the majority of institutions are timetabled. The bell, we don't have a bell here, but lots of schools have a bell and then you move, but we certainly have a timetable, and break is at the same time every day and lunch is at the same time every day. So, they're institutions, hopefully happy ones, but schools are institutions. So there's a lack of autonomy, even down to when kind of somebody can eat their lunch. So we have to create some creativity, some curiosity, some agency. And unfortunately, the response to some of the challenges has been to try and make delivering education to young people as step by step, teaching by numbers. And I think that's when it feels a drag, because I don't think that's the way education should work.
And if you think about the society is getting more and more complex.
Yeah.
So the teaching process is getting more and more complex. And what we find is the narrative is, here is the idiot-proof curriculum, do what it says, and you'll be fine. So maybe if we teach AI to take care of that part of the job, the mechanical part, and then use the teachers for the complex things. And
I think that is a sensible. There's some didactic part to teaching, some knowledge transfer, some kind of repetition things, parts of learning a new language, parts of mathematics, parts of learning, the speech of English language as well. Where AI can be used for effectively to actually be the best mode of learning. But the obsession with a one-size-fits-all curriculum and a one-size-fits-all teacher training, I think feels less agency than the response to your original question. I think we're trying to squeeze everybody in to the kind of narrowest lane possible, because we think that's a kind of cookie cutter approach to teaching and professional development. And actually, I think we want a workforce that's got complex people in it, delivering to complex children in a complex, not complicated, but embrace the complexity of it. But to do that, you've got to allow people to be people, and you've got to allow some grey areas. And I think we seem to be in a more litigious society than we've ever been. It seems to be more policy driven, more process driven, and the creativity, and with that, the agency and autonomy, seems hard to find. Maybe it's there, but it's hard to find.
Okay, so now I've got one last question just to kind of wrap everything up. And so this is I'd like to get a brief answer from all three of you, if that's okay. What professional development do you think would help practitioners develop leadership? Because I think that's one thing that seems to be lacking across the sector when it comes to practitioners having leadership. Even when it comes to certain leaders might not have the capacity to actually do leadership, even though their job title may say otherwise. So Steve, can come to you first in terms of professional development that you think would help practitioners develop leadership.
I think it comes from, all right, I think actually leaders within school or across multi-academy trusts giving some kind of internship and practice for younger leaders to do more leadership activities would be really, really helpful. Because I think you can learn about leadership, say, a master's degree, you can learn about reading books, you can observe other people, you can have coaching. But actually, I think you need to go and do it in a relatively safe space and in a safe way to actually find out what it's about and start going through that process where you reconfigure and re-identify yourself as a leader.
Okay, thank you. Andre?
There's 1,000 things going on in my head right now. It's difficult to pick one. I agree with the safe space. You need to have room to experiment, to find your voice or to find your thing. And a master's program can do that because you're in a different place and you're in a different professional learning community. But I think schools could be that place as well if you organize it. And then the experiment should be to experiment, to be brave enough to do stuff that you're unsure about. So you challenge yourself, and not in a threatening way, but you look for your what do you call it? Desirable difficulty.
Okay, Lucy?
I think to understand the community they serve and the children they serve, because I think within that you find your why. And I think all leaders need a why. It's the purpose and the mission and values. And so I think, the opportunity to do all the things that Steve and Andre have mentioned, but really understand what drives them, be it as a teacher in a classroom, be it as a learning support worker, be it as the lady who answers, or man who answers the phone in the office, whatever it is when you work in a school. Why are you there? What difference are you trying to make? And then you will be able to lead in your area. You'll be able to lead the values, the purpose, right up to the more archetypal view of a leader, the person running the organisation. I think they've got to understand what motivates them, what turns their moral compass into the right direction.
That's great. Okay, cool. I think we're running out of time, or we have run out of time. So I would just say massive thank you to the three of you. It's been a fascinating conversation. Really, really enjoyed it. And so I'm just going to pass back to Jess to finish off the event.
Yes, so as Philip mentioned, thank you, a huge thank you to Andre, Lucy and Steve for contributing to today's discussion. And it was really great to hear your perspectives on the different challenges. This brings us to the very end of our first conference series. It's been fantastic to connect with so many of you and share ideas over the past few series events. So thank you for all your support and engagement. Our next series will take place in the autumn. In the meantime, we'll be reaching out to different schools to find out what your current priorities are and any themes that you would like us to explore in our future events. So if you have any feedback, please get in touch, as this will really help us shape content that is relevant and meaningful to you. So we hope you found this series useful. Please keep an eye out for our consultation, and please do share any thoughts you have. Thank you all very much. Have a good summer, and we look forward to seeing you in the autumn.